That. For more on this, we want to bring in the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute, Jamil Jaffer. Great to have you with us. I just want to get your take on what you're seeing unfold there in the UK. I sort of posed a provocative question to Stephanie. Is that something that might happen here with respect to changes or modifications of our refugee policy, do you think?
Well, we have already seen, Kevin, a decision by the Trump administration to limit the access of asylum seekers to this country, to hold them at the border and to assess them at the border rather than letting into the country and then assessing their asylum cases. So we've seen the beginnings of that change already. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw more of that going forward.
Let me ask you about something that we've been following, obviously, for several weeks. That is the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. We do have word that Volodymyr Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, is working on a prisoner exchange with the Russians. President Trump came into office, Jamil, feeling very strongly that this was a deal he could work out. It has not worked out thus far. We're not quite a year in, and yet there does appear to be some movement. What are you hearing about that, and might this help finally bring this terrible war to an end?
Well, look, certainly prisoner exchanges are the beginning of confidence-building measures that can really get two nations into a place where they can do a deal to limit fighting and ultimately come to a peace. The problem, of course, in this scenario is that Vladimir Putin repeatedly has told President Trump he wants to do a deal, but he refuses to come to the table and put something on the table that can actually work for him and for Ukraine. The challenge also for Ukraine is they don't want to give them any territory. They saw what happened when they gave up Crimea under the Obama administration. They don't want to give up territory here. They fear that if they do it here, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, Vladimir Putin will be at it again, invading further, digging deeper, and then maybe even crossing into NATO territory. That's the real concern for the United States.
This is interesting because this all began with this notion that, well, we're trying to push back. NATO's getting too close to our border. That was the argument the Russians were making. And yet they keep nibbling. They keep taking a little land here, taking a little land there, as you mentioned, Crimea. And now they're trying to the Donbass. The real problem is I don't know that anything that comes out of the mouth of Vladimir Putin as it relates to the recreation of the former Soviet Union is trustworthy. Am I being too harsh on that?
No, Kevin, that's exactly it. He's a former KGB operative. You've got to treat him as such. Look, many presidents have thought they could work with him. President Bush said he saw into his soul.
I
famously.
remember that.
Right? Barack Obama said to him, look, give me a little room after the elections. We can work together. President Trump, same thing. Every time each president is determined Vladimir Putin is not somebody you can trust. He's somebody who wants to expand, to your point, back to the old borders of the Soviet Union. He's an intelligence operative. You can't trust a word the guy says.
Boy, it is so obvious, and I know that they have to say all the right things. I understand diplomatically you want to be in conversation, but I see no reason to trust anything that comes from the Kremlin. Meantime, I want to ask you about this. There's a secret memo out authorizing drug boat strikes, and it cites chemical weapons as a threat, and that is part of the reason. Let me share a bit of sound here. This is actually Rick Scott. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Well, first off, I'm appreciative that this is the president that cares about the health and safety of Americans. He's doing everything he can to stop these drugs from coming in and killing our kids. So I'm very appreciative that this president is stopping the drugs by fixing the southern border and now going after these drug cartels wherever they are. So I'm appreciative of what he's doing. He's doing everything he can to keep Americans safe, and Congress should not slow down what he's trying to do. Look. The thing about Maduro. Maduro's not the president. He's not the duly elected president of Venezuela. He's the head of drug cartels. It's basically a drug cartel-run country right now.
I think it's a fascinating argument for continuing the strikes. I think, obviously, you want to do all you can to stay within the framework of the law. What do you think of his comments?
Well, look, I think Senator Scott is right to the following extent. He's right that we have a real drug problem in this country. True. President Trump is right. That's a drug problem that happens at the southern border and does come in through the Caribbean. So taking strikes against drug dealers, wherever they might be, is certainly going to push back on them. They're going to be more fearful about bringing those drug boats in. The larger question, though, is this a law enforcement operation or a military operation? President Trump has come down very clearly. This is a military operation. That's a change in analysis by the U.S. government, but one that we've made previously with respect to terrorism. Now President Trump has made it with respect to drugs. If Congress wants to do something about it, they could step in. They're not doing that.
Would you unpack that just a bit? I think people sometimes forget, under the Obama administration, that's when this started to shift just a bit. And when you give that extra leeway to the executive, I don't think this administration's out of step with what has happened previously.
No, we've seen a number of U.S. administrations go after terrorists around the globe.
That's right.
Into foreign countries, violating, quote unquote, their sovereignty, because we've said, look, if you're unwilling or unable to control a problem that's going to cause us a problem, we're going to come after your country and address those threats like terrorists.
Yeah.
Now we're just talking about on counter drug strikes. Right now they're in international waters. If it happens in Venezuela, if it happens in Mexico, there's a long-standing basis for that. The question just is, do you think drug dealers and the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans due to fentanyl is a national security issue? That's a good debate to have in this country. It's a debate we're talking about today. But the president's been very clear. He sees a national security threat. And frankly, if you think about it, while we did lose 3,500 people on 9/11, 10,000 of fentanyl over the years, I mean, that's pretty bad.
That is terrible. Last thing, I want to ask you about the argument that I've heard from some Democrats on Capitol Hill. They say this is a violation of international law. You can't just start picking off boats at night, even if you do suspect that something untoward is happening with those particular vessels. What do you say to people who make that argument?
Look, the United States has the lawful authority to ensure that its national security is protected. If it is true that this is a national security threat, which is what the president said, and nobody has made an argument in Congress that that's not what it is. If they want to, they can, but they haven't. Until that happens, you can take national security strikes against threats to the nation. We've done it since 9/11 all around the globe, in international waters, in foreign countries. So, look, if we want to have a debate about whether drug dealers are a national security threat, that's a debate to have. But on the question whether there's lawful authority under domestic and international law, that's a pretty easy call.
Always great to have you with us, my friend. Appreciate your time today. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us here on Fox News Live. Meantime, the University of Wisconsin